The sun over the Horn of Africa does not merely shine, it punishes. It bakes the red earth of the Ogaden Plateau until the air ripples with heat, creating a landscape where survival is a daily conquest. In the mid-1970s, this harsh, scrub-filled wilderness became the center of the world's attention, not because of its resources, but because of a dream held by one man and the map he intended to redraw with blood. Mohamed Siad Barre, the president of the Somali Democratic Republic, stood in Mogadishu and looked toward the horizon. For him, the borders drawn by colonial powers were not lines of sovereignty, but scars that needed to be healed. He envisioned a greater Somalia, a single nation uniting all ethnic Somalis scattered across the Horn. At the heart of this vision was the Ogaden, a massive stretch of territory under the control of Ethiopia. To Barre, the Ogaden was not Ethiopian, it was a stolen limb of his own country. By 1977, he decided it was time to take it back. What followed was a conflict that would not only reshape the region, but would force the world's greatest superpowers into a diplomatic and military betrayal that remains one of the most stunning pivots of the Cold War. To understand the audacity of Siad Barre's gamble, one must understand the tools he had at his disposal.
Since seizing power in a 1969 coup, Barre had transformed Somalia into a dedicated Marxist-Leninist state. This alignment brought him into the warm embrace of the Soviet Union. Moscow, eager for a strategic foothold near the Red Sea and the oil routes of the Middle East, poured an incredible amount of military hardware into Somalia. By the mid-70s, the Somali National Army was arguably the most powerful force in sub-Saharan Africa. They possessed hundreds of T-54 and T-55 tanks, a fleet of MiG-21 fighter jets, and modern artillery that far outclassed their neighbors. The Soviets didn't just provide the weapons, they provided the training, the doctrine, and the infrastructure, including the strategic deep-water port at Berbera. Barre was a man who believed his own propaganda. He saw himself as the father of his nation, a revolutionary leader who could achieve what no one else had. But he was also a realist who knew that his window of opportunity was tied to the chaos unfolding next door. Ethiopia, Somalia's historic rival, was in the midst of a violent collapse. In 1974, the long reign of Emperor Haile Selassie ended in a military coup. The ancient empire was replaced by a chaotic, blood-soaked committee of military officers known as the Derg. As the Derg struggled to consolidate power, Ethiopia spiraled into a period known as the Red Terror. Internal purges, regional rebellions in Eritrea, and a crumbling economy left the Ethiopian military fractured and demoralized. To Siad Barre, the message was clear. The Lion of Judah was wounded, and the gates to the Ogaden were swinging open. However, there was a complication. The new leader of Ethiopia, Mengistu Haile Mariam, was also a committed Marxist. Suddenly, the Soviet Union found itself in a bizarre geopolitical predicament. It was the patron of two neighboring socialist states who hated each other with a centuries-old fervor. Barre watched as Moscow began to make overtures to Addis Ababa, and he realized that if he waited too long, the Soviets might force a peace that would leave his dream of Greater Somalia unfulfilled. In the summer of 1977, the order was given. On July 13th, the Somali National Army crossed the border in force. This was not a mere border skirmish or a hit-and-run guerrilla operation. It was a full-scale, conventional invasion. Over 35,000 Somali troops, supported by 250 tanks and a massive wave of aerial bombardment, surged into the Ogaden. The speed of the advance was breathtaking. The Somali forces moved with a precision and aggression that caught the Ethiopian defenders completely off guard. In the first few weeks, the Somalis captured the strategic town of Ogaden, securing a vital airbase and a foothold deep within the territory.
Barre's tanks rolled across the desert sands, mirroring the blitzkrieg tactics of World War II, bypassing Ethiopian strongpoints and cutting off supply lines. For the people of Somalia, the news from the front was intoxicating. After decades of colonial humiliation and divided families, it seemed the dream was finally becoming a reality. The five-pointed star on the Somali flag, representing the 5 regions where Somalis lived, seemed closer than ever to being unified. By August, the Somali advance had reached the gates of the most strategic targets in the region, the cities of Jijiga, Harar, and Diradawa. If these fell, the Ogaden would be effectively severed from Ethiopia, and the path to the highlands would be open. The battle for Jijiga was particularly brutal. It was a clash of armor and willpower, but the superior training and Soviet-made equipment of the Somali army eventually broke the Ethiopian resistance. In September 1977, Jijiga fell. The Ethiopian army didn't just retreat, it disintegrated in a panicked flight that left the road to the interior wide open. At this moment, Mohamed Siad Barre was at the absolute zenith of his power. He was the conqueror of the Ogaden, the man who had humbled an ancient empire. In the streets of Mogadishu, he was hailed as a hero. But in the corridors of the Kremlin, the mood was far from celebratory.
The Soviet Union was now facing an impossible choice. They had spent years building Somalia into a military powerhouse, only to see those same weapons used to invade another potential ally. Leonid Brezhnev and the Soviet leadership tried to mediate, proposing a federation between Somalia and Ethiopia, but Barre, sensing total victory, refused to back down. He believed he was indispensable to the Soviets. He believed the port of Berbera was too valuable for Moscow to ever risk losing. He gambled that the Soviet Union would eventually accept the new reality on the ground and continue their support. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Behind the scenes, the Soviet leadership was growing tired of Barre's defiance. They saw in Mengistu Haile Mariam a more reliable, if more desperate partner. While Somali soldiers celebrated their victories in the dusty streets of Jijiga, a massive logistical shift was beginning to stir in Moscow. The betrayal did not happen overnight, but it was decisive. As the Somali offensive slowed down due to overstretched supply lines and the sheer vastness of the terrain, the flow of Soviet spare parts and ammunition began to dry up. Barre's generals reported that their tanks were breaking down and their jets were grounded for lack of maintenance. Meanwhile, a massive Soviet air bridge was being established, not to Mogadishu, but to Addis Ababa.
Hundreds of transport planes began landing in Ethiopia, carrying thousands of tons of modern weaponry, including newer T-62 tanks and BM-21 rocket launchers. But the most shocking development was yet to come. The Soviets weren't just sending machines, they were sending men. Not just advisors, but elite combat units and a massive contingent of battle-hardened Cuban troops sent by Fidel Castro to defend the Ethiopian revolution. Siad Barre looked at the maps in his command center and realized the board had changed. The superpower that had armed him was now arming his enemy. The socialist brotherhood he had touted for a decade had evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculated abandonment. The Somali advance halted, the momentum died, and the desert winds began to carry the sound of a counterattack that Barre was no longer prepared to stop. He had reached for glory, and for a few brief months he held it in his hands. But the very forces that had raised him up were now preparing to crush him. As the first Cuban columns arrived on the front lines and Soviet generals took command of the Ethiopian defenses, the hunters were about to become the hunted. The war for the Ogaden was no longer a local struggle for land. It had become a survival battle against the full weight of the Eastern Bloc, and Siad Barre was about to learn the true price of his ambition.
By late 1977, Mohamed Siad Barre was experiencing a form of geopolitical vertigo. The very superpower that had built his military from the ground up had not only turned its back on him, but had begun actively engineering his destruction. In November, Barre officially broke diplomatic ties with the Soviet Union and expelled all Soviet advisors, stripping them of their access to the strategic port of Berbera. He gambled that the United States, sensing an opportunity to weaken Soviet influence in the region, would rush to his aid with the hardware he desperately needed. It was a second, equally fatal miscalculation. While the Carter administration in Washington watched the conflict with interest, they were wary of being seen as supporting an aggressor who had violated internationally recognized borders. Somalia found itself in a terrifying state of isolation, while Ethiopia was suddenly the recipient of one of the most massive and rapid military buildups in modern history. The Soviet air bridge to Addis Ababa was a logistical marvel.
Over the course of just a few months, Moscow dispatched more than 15% of its entire military transport fleet to ferry T-62 tanks, BM-21 Grad rocket launchers, and MiG-23 fighter bombers into the heart of Ethiopia. But the hardware was only half of the equation. To ensure these weapons were used with maximum lethality, the Soviets sent high-ranking generals, led by Vasily Petrov, to take over the strategic planning of the war. More significantly, they greenlit a massive intervention by Cuba. Under the personal direction of Fidel Castro, approximately 18,000 elite Cuban combat troops were deployed to the front lines. These were not mere instructors, they were veteran soldiers, many of whom had recently fought in Angola. For the Somali National Army, which was already exhausted, low on fuel, and fighting at the end of fragile supply lines, the arrival of a fresh, modern, and highly organized international force was a death sentence. The turning point came at the gates of Harar and Dire Dawa. For months, the Somali forces had battered these cities, coming within sight of the minarets and airfields. But the combined Ethiopian and Cuban defense was a wall they could not climb. The Somalis, once the masters of mobile desert warfare, found themselves pinned down in static positions, becoming easy targets for the relentless Soviet-directed artillery and airstrikes. The psychological shift was instantaneous. The Somali soldiers, realizing they were now fighting the very same instructors who had taught them how to fire their rifles, began to feel the weight of their abandonment.
In early 1978, the Ethiopian and Cuban counteroffensive, dubbed Operation Rocket, was launched. It was not a slow push, it was a devastating pincer movement that showcased the full might of Soviet doctrine. While Somali forces braced for a frontal assault near the strategic Marta Pass, General Petrov and the Cuban commanders executed a daring maneuver. They used massive Mi-6 transport helicopters to airlift armored vehicles and troops over the mountains, landing them directly behind the Somali lines. The Somali army, caught between a frontal assault and a surprise force in their rear, collapsed. The town of Jijiga, the crown jewel of Barre's initial conquest, was retaken in March 1978 in a matter of hours. The retreat turned into a rout. Somali tanks, out of fuel and spares, were abandoned in the red dust of the Ogaden, many of them still bearing the insignia of the nation that was now destroying them. On March 15, 1978, faced with total military annihilation, Mohamed Siad Barre announced a complete withdrawal of his forces from the region. The dream of Greater Somalia had not just been deferred, it had been incinerated. But for Siad Barre, the end of the war was only the beginning of a much longer and more painful decline. The defeat in the Ogaden was a traumatic shock to the Somali national psyche. The country had invested everything, its wealth, its youth, and its international standing, into a campaign that ended in a humiliating retreat. As the remnants of the army limped back across the border, they brought with them a profound sense of betrayal and resentment toward the central government. To make matters worse, the war triggered a massive humanitarian crisis. Hundreds of thousands of ethnic Somali refugees fled the Ogaden into Somalia, placing an impossible burden on a shattered economy. Barre, once the charismatic father of the revolution, began to retreat into a bunker mentality. He became increasingly paranoid, surrounding himself only with members of his own Marahan clan, and purging the military and civil service of anyone he deemed a threat. The internal fissures that would eventually tear Somalia apart began to open almost immediately after the war. In April 1978, just weeks after the withdrawal, a group of disgruntled army officers attempted a coup against Barre. Though the coup failed, it signaled that the unified facade of the Somali state was crumbling. Barre responded with brutal repression, launching scorched earth campaigns against rival clans and regions he suspected of disloyalty. This cycle of violence and clan-based favoritism eroded the legitimacy of the Somali state, turning the government into a predatory entity that existed only to preserve Barre's power. The war that was meant to unite all Somalis ended up sowing the seeds of their most violent division. As the 1980s progressed, Barre's Somalia became a shell of its former self. To survive, he pivoted once more toward the West, offering the United States the use of Somali bases in exchange for economic and military aid.
But the aid was never enough to fix the deep structural damage caused by the Ogaden disaster. The country was drowning in debt, and civil unrest was transforming into full-scale armed insurgency. The various rebel groups, often supported by Ethiopia in a bitter reversal of roles, began to close in on Mogadishu. By 1991, the man who had once dreamed of ruling a regional superpower was forced to flee his capital in a tank, leaving behind a nation that was about to disappear into the vacuum of a decade-long civil war and total state collapse. The Ogaden War remains a haunting lesson in the dangers of Cold War hubris and the volatility of ethnic nationalism. It was a conflict where soldiers were pieces on a global chessboard, moved by leaders in Moscow, Washington, and Havana, who cared little for the ancient rhythms of life in the Horn of Africa.
For a few months in 1977, Mohamed Siad Barre believed he could rewrite history and defy the gravity of international politics. He learned, at the cost of his country's future, that when a superpower switches sides, the ground beneath a small nation doesn't just shake, it vanishes. The red earth of the Ogaden is still there, silent and scorched by the sun. But the Somalia that went to war to claim it is gone forever, replaced by the enduring scars of a betrayal that neither the land nor its people have ever truly forgotten.